Thanks everyone for joining us today. We are going to talk about assessing safety when traveling internationally. This is a discussion. Travel, as I mentioned before we hit record, is a very personal and individual choice. Travel by its very nature involves risk. It involves exploring. It involves opening yourself up, hopefully, to new experiences and new places, so we can better see that no matter where you potentially live, that we all are people here on this planet, on the same planet, faced with the same, whether it's, we get born, we live, we eat, we die, comes kind of some basic, general, same types of experiences. So, in that spirit, uh, due to current, I'm going to just say it, the United States just recently put out a statement. I guess it's a statement, it's a warning to Americans to reconsider travel anywhere and everywhere, basically, internationally. So that's a pretty big blanket statement. It kind of goes completely against the idea of travel. I mean, the world is a big place, as we all know. There's many countries, there's many continents, there's small towns, there's big towns. And I'll be honest, I'm coming to you from Las Vegas in the United States, and the United States has a lot of situations and places that I may not personally put myself. So, again, is that going to affect my decision to travel? Well, that's why we're having the discussion, because there are people that live in other countries that view the United States in particular, with a lot of our uprisings and violent incidences and random things that happen, whether it's at Las Vegas a few years back, had a music festival incident that was very deadly. So they may not want to come also to the United States, and I live here, so I may have a different viewpoint as well. So we're going to go around the room, and anyone that would like to kind of share, what are some things that you think about when you're thinking about traveling internationally and thinking about safety? Are there places or reasons, or, just let's chat a little bit about that. So are you willing to share a little bit on that, Marianne?
Sure. Well, when I was took a group to Mexico in May, and a lot of people were telling me, don't go to Mexico. Like, my friends, my family, it's like, why do you want to go to Mexico? It's so dangerous down there. And, it's like, it depends on where you are. And, I was going to Oaxaca, and so what I do is I join the expat Facebook groups, and
Hmm.
I ask the people that are living there what it's like and how do they assess the risk of visitors coming. And that's worked out really well. Um, I tried it for my upcoming Morocco trip, and one person said, "Oh, no, 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 don't come. It's so bad here now. It's so dangerous, and you might not be able to get home." And blah 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 blah. And then another person says, "Oh, I feel safer here than in any of the Western countries." Um, so it's a tough call.
Yes, definitely. So for you personally, it sounds like you kind of do your research, and choosing a destination is more about other factors maybe than safety. Is that what I'm hearing?
Well, no, safety is has to be a priority. I mean, I'm not going to take a group of people and put them in a dangerous situation. I just do my best to find out what the truth is about the particular destination that I'm going. So, like, okay, so I wouldn't go to, the drug lords in Mexico, but other parts of Mexico were fine. Oaxaca was very safe. I totally felt safe there. Um, with the new stuff going on in the Middle East, which is kind of close to Morocco, where we're supposed to be going in April, I don't know. So I will probably, check out the government warnings and check with the expats there and check with Elaine, who's an expert, and make a decision from there.
Okay. Thanks for the input. Deborah, what are some of the things you think about when traveling international? Um,
Yes. Yeah, some of the similar things. I know when I went to Paris, I had read, I was on the Paris Facebook page and they talked about pickpockets. And one lady told of an incident where her father was knocked down by some pickpockets and they were girls, a group of girls. So I was not comfortable when I was in Paris. I kept looking around. I kept telling myself, oh, just relax. Don't be stupid. Just, be watchful. But I didn't like that atmosphere. And I probably let that Facebook page go too far in my head. But I was very concerned because I'm not young. And if somebody were to knock me down,
Right.
I think it would really do some damage. So I was very nervous about that. But I was very comfortable in London.
Nice. Good.
So anywhere else, I don't have any plans to go anywhere right now. But I just keep watching the news.
Right.
The
All right.
I keep
pickpockets, the
listening to the
pickpocket.
state. I try not to watch too much news.
Dale, you wanted to say something?
Oh yeah, the pickpockets in Paris have been around for a long, long time because we went in 2008, and the tour guide that we went with said, "Watch out for the pickpockets." There were kids hiding under the ladies' skirts. These ladies would wear these big skirts with children hiding under them, and the children would come out and pick your pocket.
Yeah.
Oh God.
So I sort of knew about that in advance, so I wore like a purse that was on the inside of my clothes.
Yeah. I think you need to be careful like that in any city, really.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
I agree. I think, one of the smart things to do is whatever monetary sources you have with you, don't put it all in one pocket. Spread it around, whether it's on your body in different places or some is in the room if you can trust the room safe. But maybe some in a purse or maybe some in a bra or a money belt or something. But just don't ever keep it all in one place. That way, if they do get you, they don't get everything.
Right.
That's a good idea.
Yeah. Dale, did you want to comment on just concerns you have for safety when traveling international or making assessments when you travel, things that concern you or
Well, my husband says, now you're going to retire and you're going to want to travel, and they're shutting down the world again, and we're going to have World War III. And he said your timing is completely off. And I said I don't know about World War III, but short of that, I said you just never know. And I pointed out to him that he walked into a meeting with El Chapo in New Mexico, and that was in the United States. And I said, so something like that could happen anywhere.
right, right. Most definitely. Angel, did you want to comment on your feelings about concerns or when you're
I think
traveling?
when I'm traveling, I do a lot of solo traveling, but that'll depend on where I'm going. Like I was in Morocco last year. I made sure I hooked up with a tour group. I was not comfortable going along solo. There's just certain countries that I won't do that with. When I was in Holland and Belgium, I had no problem just flitting around and going on the streets to myself and doing this that by myself, because you pay attention to what's out there. You pay attention to the government sites. You do use any resources you can, excuse me, to try and get as much information as you can. I love the idea of using the expat community. That's a great idea. I haven't really gone to too many places. Well, I shouldn't say that. I have been to expat places or countries, but I just haven't thought of using that resource, and that's a great resource. But I think it's just a matter of keeping your eyes open and trying to be aware and and travel in a pack if you have to, in a small group, 3, 4 women. That way you always have some, and you know what? I take kickboxing, learn a little bit of just minor self-defense, just enough to give yourself 5 extra seconds if you need it for someone coming after you in whichever way. But mostly it's just, I don't like to listen to the news too much because so much of it's bogus. It's hard to really get a truthful news nowadays unless you're there on the spot. So other than that, it's just be watchful and do research, lots of research.
Yeah. Elaine, I know you're in Canada. What's happening? Are they telling Canadians not to travel anywhere? Or what are your thoughts on the topic?
There are heightened warnings. So I haven't looked, like I checked for Morocco. But generally speaking, things are sort of the yellow alert, meaning that they're urging caution. But there's certainly no messaging coming from the Canadian government saying that you should not travel. There's basically no place where we are told not to travel. I mean, there's a small handful where Canada doesn't have diplomatic relations. And so in those places, maybe they'll tell you not to travel. But those warnings have nothing to do with what's currently happening in the Middle East. But yeah, it's worth, I guess, comparing the Canadian versus the American experience, because of course, it does, like, you can do the basic personal assessment that you should do when you're traveling anywhere. And so think about what makes you feel safe at home, and then what changes to make you feel less safe when you're going somewhere else. It could be something as simple as you don't know the language. Whatever it is, these are things that we as travelers commonly manage to overcome. But aside from that, it behooves us these days to take a look at the geopolitical situation to see what kind of relationships our countries have with our potential destination country. Canada and Morocco happen to belong to something called a francophonie, because we both have French-speaking populations. So that gives Canada a different relationship with, let's say, Morocco than you would in the United States. In addition, of course, and I don't want to limit this to a discussion about Morocco, but that's where we offer tours, and so that's where my destination interest lies. But the United States has a different relationship in the world generally. And so you as Americans have a different level of concern that does not generally touch us as Canadians. Now, I wouldn't be so naive as to say that we're untouched by that, because there are many places in the world, including Morocco, where some people look at us and they think we're the same as Americans.
Right.
So in their education, they don't get much of a, distinction between Canadians and Americans. We're all North Americans. We're all way richer than they are. We have the luxury and the privilege to travel, and many of them never will and can't. So there are some of those things that it behooves you to understand before you go. Not that it should deter you from going, but it might change how you approach people, so that you approach them with a bit more respect and with an openness to see where they're at before you jump right in and make assumptions about friendship or willingness to connect or whatever. Because there's no question that even since 9/11, maybe even predating that, the concept of people in some of these other countries towards us as North Americans has also changed. There's a certain level of anger, because in the case of Morocco, just to use that as an example, they say to me, when we look south, meaning into other countries of Africa, we smile. But they say, but when we look north into Europe, we cry. So the modern methods of communications have enabled young people in particular, but not exclusively, access to an understanding of the life and lifestyle of other people in the world that they aspire to and are going to have difficulty reaching. So I could go into an extended discussion of how that is working out for a developing country like Morocco, which is another consideration because Morocco is developing. So second world, it's not a poor country. But these kinds of things should sensitize you to what you're likely to find on the ground. Now, again, I'd like to say that every time the world turns, billions of people across the world live their lives peacefully and live from one breakfast to the other without incident. And so some of what I'm seeing as a reaction to potential travel to places like Morocco, but not exclusively, are frankly irrational. So to give you a bit of an example here, we currently have 2 tours on the ground and in progress in Morocco. There's a little backstory as to why we happen to have and have had a large contingent of Jewish people out of the city of Atlanta come to us for service. It really has to do with one couple having a fabulous trip who have since recommended us to everybody they know.
Wow.
Okay, so we have 2 couples who approached this trip, and the woman in one of the couples decided she could not go. She has nieces and nephews who have been conscripted into the army in Israel, and that was enough for her to feel that she could not come to Morocco. The other couple is happily enjoying their trip in Morocco. On the very same day that they arrived, we had another woman, a Jewish woman, and her daughter-in-law. The daughter-in-law is currently in Israel and can't get out, and the other woman is in Atlanta. So they weren't going to travel until December, but they decided to cancel because the one woman might not have been able to get out of Israel. The situation was questionable, and it happened to be the last day where they could get a refund on their airline ticket. So you see the difference in judgment?
Mm-hmm.
And then again, on the very same day, again, as a result of this referral, we had a family of 5 contact us. They're also out of Atlanta. They had planned a big family trip in December, to go to Israel. And they did decide that it probably wasn't likely to be safe for them in December. But they'd been thinking of Morocco sometime before, so they instantly switched their flights, and they're now coming to Morocco. And what's interesting is that their trip will take exactly the same dates as the woman and her Israeli daughter-in-law. So I'm only pointing that out to show you that nothing materially has changed in Morocco. Nothing's changed. It's as safe or dangerous as it ever was. And yet here are 4 groups of people who have made completely different assessments on the safety to themselves. So that, I'm telling you that so that you think about how you personally assess danger, safety, comfort. What are your personal parameters? Because honestly, as an organizer of tours, I cannot make that decision for you. I can't read your mind. I don't know how you assess safety, even in your own city where you live. And so it's really up to you to ask the questions, but again, step back and see, really, what are the chances of things going wrong in Morocco? Why? If you do read the news reports or listen to them, there's, a lot of prediction that things could go south in the immediate countries around the Middle East. And your government largely is having considerable influence and involvement in that. But if you listen to the voices, everyone is urging the most likely aggravants to settle down and to not cause trouble, because the world does not want trouble there. But if it happens, surely it's going to happen there first and then spread. Now, as adults, realistically looking at the world, how long does it really take for geopolitical things to get out of hand? For countries to make the decision to become involved, depending which country it is, it would take a long time. Like in the case of Morocco, Morocco may share, religious commonalities because it is an Islamic country, but people who call it an Arab country are making a big mistake, because the ethnic foundational culture there is Berber. And Arabs and Arabic influence is more recent phenomenon, like, okay, several hundred years, but still, it's not the founding culture. So Morocco actually, although it's got that historical ethnic connection and certainly a religious connection, economically and socially, it is far more open, less conservative than other Islamic countries, and it's far more aligned with life and lifestyle in Europe. Mm-hmm. That is where Morocco goes to look for economic partners and that kind of thing. So that's where you would make a completely different assessment, I believe, in choosing to go to Morocco over April, Egypt.
Right.
Egypt is more concerning because, of course, they're right on the front line. They're the ones, managing the entry of humanitarian aid to Gaza and so on. So you can see that the actions of some of these countries on the basis of politics have far more to do with the likelihood of any visitor being influenced. Having said that, I wouldn't discourage you from going to Egypt. Those people, the everyday people, need tourism. Right. And if your trip is well planned, there is no reason why you should get caught up in anything happening locally. Sure, there was a great big demonstration in Casablanca in front of the embassies, but so there was in Toronto, so there was in Montreal, so there has been in Washington. Of course there are. These are predictable. Right. Predictable. Anybody can sit back in the chair and say, somebody's going to get down to the main square and have some signs and yell some, comments. Predictable. Right. So the last thing I'll say is the one thing you do have to consider as being unpredictable is the fact that in all of our countries, and those countries in particular, there are known terrorist cells. There are extremists. They are what is unpredictable. Right. And I would only say in closing, if you want to know what they're going to do, think like them. Are you going to pick 4 people in an unmarked car with your fingers crossed that they might be tourists? Or are you going to go for the big international hotels? Are you going to go for the embassies? Are you going to go for the great big tourist buses that are clearly marked as kosher trips from Israel? Right. Like, there are some ways of saying, even if the country is experiencing some unrest or has the potential, there are lots of ways of making yourself safe and having a lovely time there. Right. Yeah, those
Thank
are some,
you. No. That's some great input, Elaine. And it does. It's like, I like the comment of that there's cells all over the world. There's little incidences that we are seeing, and we're going to continue to see, in the last several years, we've been seeing it since 9/11 here in the United States even. And so again, it's putting yourself in that mindset of, are they going to go for, like you said, a smaller bed and breakfast, or do they want to make a big splash? So I often think about that. Even here stateside, am I going to go to the smaller venue for music, or am I, like some of these big events, it's just almost impossible to have security when we want to live in a country that's free and open and isn't like patting everybody. Even if you patted everyone down, there's people that get in and work on the inside. There's ways. And so if you think like that terrorist, that robber, the bad guy, whatever you want to label that incident, that person, you kind of think through those things, and maybe again, smaller groups, where are you staying, sign up for things like the smart traveler enrollment programs. I know Elaine and I had talked before the call that Canada has one that's similar. So you're notifying the government that you are in whatever country you're going to. They see the dates that you're going to be there. They see where you're staying. So if something should change, and also like you mentioned with the demonstrations, I know years ago, even going to Europe, if they're aware that there's been chatter that there's going to be a demonstration or that there's going to be a train strike even, which may affect your ability to get to a destination or change your pattern of travel, you'll hopefully get some sort of notification like that. But again, working with locals, if your guide is local, these are all ways that you can mitigate some of those concerns.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I would just add that, here in Canada, we've had mosques bombed, people killed. We still have, synagogues and other places of worship for Jews hit with graffiti and all kinds of things. So, like you, we have laws against hatred and that kind of thing so that we can prosecute those once we finally catch them. But you can see that we still think our countries are safe.
Yeah.
So there's no place that is safe from hatred. And if somebody wants to create a problem, they will. And there's no way of insulating yourself from those kinds of things. But there's also, on that basis, no reason to stay home. As April's pointed out, our governments now have systems in place to help us travel freely. These systems to register where we're going, where we're going to be staying, these things are really encouraging us to travel, because we're still ambassadors,
Right.
Every time I sit down with a group of these young guys from Morocco, I become, a person they've never met before. They don't have the opportunity to meet people from other countries. Moroccans are basically not allowed to travel except to 5 countries on the planet without a visa. And so their opportunities to explore the world and to get the benefit from meeting other people and learning about other cultures is profoundly limited.
This is so true. And just like you said, a lot of these countries now are so dependent on our tourist dollars. So when we immediately get concerned and pull back, we're hurting the average family in many regards, that this is their livelihood. There was the earthquake, there's been several earthquakes this year around the globe, and the earthquake, just like in California, an earthquake may happen, but that doesn't mean the whole rest of California isn't safe to travel to or should be ignored or not. There's ways to travel responsibly and safely, again, and just situational awareness, which all of you brought that up in your comments, is just being aware. What are you comfortable with? Are you, if it's language, because some of these countries, the language is so completely different, whether it's the Middle East or Japan or anywhere, the characters are totally different. So learning a few things, working with local guides and people that are going to help you navigate that.
Yeah. Yeah, I would say that if you travel alone, that's one thing. And I certainly traveled alone my first time to Morocco and didn't have a single problem, and have still, if Imad is off driving, I still travel around myself with no difficulty at all. But at the same time, if you want to join a group, then be clear about the policies of the company organizing your tour to make sure you're satisfied with the plans they have in place in case there are any problems. And don't be afraid to ask questions, because the moment that you hear a tour company or an operator dismiss or minimize the prospect of risk, or if you're not satisfied with the plans they have on paper, how they would protect you, what their route to safety would be for you, how they would connect you with your embassy, things like that. If you're not satisfied with the answers, that's part of your risk assessment. Maybe you pick a different company, or maybe because the tour is so great, you fill in the gaps for yourself, right? They have no plan to connect you to your embassy. Well, make sure you have the embassy's number and address and those kinds of things. So I guess what I'm saying is, just because you put yourself on somebody's tour doesn't mean you can abandon personal responsibility for your safety.
Right. I think that's an excellent point, Elaine. And if any of these warnings and things like this, it should make us better travelers. Ask questions if you are joining a tour, and maybe if you like, for myself, there are countries I wouldn't go to solo. Most of Europe, I wouldn't have a problem going solo or with one other person or planning it. My father and I renting a car for instance, and driving around. But the Middle East is very different. So I am planning to go to Egypt, and I did, decide, what the best plan is to go with a company and choose a company that the gentleman, he was born and raised, he's Egyptian, his family lives in Egypt. He's going to take us to meet his family. He's excited to share us with those closest to him. But again, as a responsible traveler, yes, I need to ask him, or should have already asked, or anyone in my group that has concerns, what are you watching, what's happening? Is there another hotel choice? Should you feel that this hotel is maybe too big and splashy? Staying in a more family owned. I know Elaine's talked many times about the Riyadh, I think it's Riyadh, am I pronouncing that? In Morocco, and that are much smaller accommodations, and you'll get a more local experience, and B, it's not got Hilton splashed all over the side, or a big corporate name, in other words, which does, let's be honest, that does draw the attention for someone that's angry, and as you said, looks north and sees, us representing something that they'll never attain, flaunting what we have. And in that same mindset, I've done extensive looking online for what types of clothing am I going to wear. I'm not going to wear big gaudy logos splashed over. I'm going to really try. I mean, it's obvious. I'm a white-skinned American. It's pretty obvious. So I'm going to do my best to blend in, look local, not be disrespectful, but be respectful to the more traditional ways they dress, and try to be mindful of that as best I can.
Mm-hmm.
Do any of you have some? Go ahead, Elaine.
Well, I'm just wondering, we've said a lot. I'm just wondering what everyone is making of our comments, and if you have any additional thoughts.
I think that you're absolutely right, Elaine. Everyone has to make their own decision. As a travel company, we can do as much as we can in terms of research. But when it comes right down to it, they need to decide whether they're comfortable going or not. I'm on the fence about Morocco. But I'm gonna wait and see what happens. I'm not gonna cancel the trip right now, because I'm really looking forward to going. And it's like, I don't know. I mean, with all the mass shootings here, you think people around the world probably don't want to come here because, the US is a dangerous place. You can't go to a movie theater or a concert or whatever, go to school without worrying about a mass shooting. I mean, terrorism is a level up. So that does frighten me, but I mean, we can't just hide in our houses.
Right.
It's kind of interesting because of course, Morocco experienced a major earthquake on September 8th.
Right.
And so prior to this, incident in the Middle East, that's when people were contacting me asking if they should cancel their trips.
Right.
So now that is a far more clear and present danger to people traveling in Morocco and on our trips, because we frequently take people on hikes into the mountains where that exact earthquake took place. That was a far more reasonable question for people to be asking than to be asking me now about the chances of, this Middle Eastern crisis spilling over into Morocco. And in fact, up in the mountains there were a couple of small family-owned hotels that we used to take people to that have been wiped out. On another day, we could have had clients there. Thankfully, that didn't happen. But again, you know, think of your karma.
Yeah.
Right.
Like there's just no way of predicting that. There's no way of controlling that. Our clients can't control that. We certainly can't. So there are some things where you simply have to do the best you can. As operators, we're certainly as careful and considered as we can possibly be. We would never put people in danger. And even when people contact us wanting trips off the beaten path, well, they're going to go where it's still safe to be off the beaten path for foreigners. Because I've been everywhere in Morocco, including south into the Western Sahara, which is a disputed zone. And so I'd never take clients there. But nevertheless, I evaluated that for my own personal safety, and knowing who I was traveling with, felt it was an okay thing to do. But I'll tell you, we were real careful. Yeah.
Yeah, I think you brought up some good points there. Definitely. And natural disasters, that's a tricky one, and something none of us can predict, even stateside. So there's really, so again, being prepared for, you know, I lead a lot of groups in the United States and Alaska in particular, which could have an earthquake, could have a forest fire, could have, you know, we could be off grid, so to speak. So I'm really cautious as a leader of, you know, some people do, they want to go view the bears, and I know myself, I'm not comfortable taking people that much into the wilderness to be skilled to be right where the bears are fishing. That's a different kind of expedition, and I'll be more than happy to recommend that, but I'm not going to, again, I'm not going to put myself and my group into that situation if I'm not trained and really have done the background work. So again, I would encourage you as travelers to ask those questions. And because I do get clients, they want to go photograph the bears and be right across the creek, I'm going to suggest someone else that I know, or another company that they, you know, refer them to. Or I think last year someone wanted to go ice glacier hiking or something. And again, that's not something, you know, or surfing out there where the glacier rocks or ice chunks are. And I'm like, nah, that's not my skill level. So
We did dog sledding on a glacier
yeah.
with a group from an Alaska cruise.
Mhm.
Right.
But things have changed a lot. When we went to Glacier in Yellowstone National Park when I was a kid, people would just go up to the bears. My mom went down to the lake and was taking pictures of the bear cubs, unaware that the mama bear was chasing her.
Oh my gosh. Yeah.
Yeah.
Deborah, did you have
There you
any
go.
questions or comments to add to the discussion?
No, no, it's just all very interesting, and you're right. You have to make up your own mind, do your own research. My daughter's very much into things that are happening in other countries, and I ask her about it. And if she says don't go, then I don't go. If she says, well, sounds good, you know, go ahead. But I do ask, you know, opinions of people I know who keep up with information that way. And somebody mentioned about registering with the State Department. I don't care where I go, I register.
Yeah.
I want somebody to know where I am.
I think
Mhm.
that's super smart. And even just telling friends and relatives. I've
Yeah.
given my itinerary, most recently, what's coming up to even more extended family, because again, you never know if in their circles, should something happen, some of these greater circles, they may have resources to help you if in fact you needed that. And I think we see that in many instances. If someone is aware that you went hiking and you last were here, you know, you're more likely to get help as quickly as possible.
Right. Yeah. Yeah, I believe in that.
You know, I think sometimes safety is really just a matter of good common sense also. It, you know, could be as basic as that sometimes.
Thanks. Yeah, that's a good point.
As true as that is, and as much as every person on the planet believes they have common sense, the moment, I can tell you, the moment that people get themselves in trouble, all bets are off.
Of
That's
course.
when that's when suddenly you didn't tell me, I didn't know, and the fingers start pointing. And so I have to say, um, I hate having to have a big contract and everything. We've operated our business largely on trust, frankly, where I connect the itinerary to an extensive email talking about what's included and excluded. And I've kind of wanted not to have to have an actual contract, but we've had a couple of scares the last year or two where people see, because Morocco is a developing country, they do expect people to have good common sense, because if they don't, they'll die.
Mhm.
So, in parks where we would have signs and we'd have barriers and we'd have fences and God knows what, they don't. And if you're stupid enough to walk to the edge of a cliff and you fall off, it's too bad for you. That's the attitude. So we can't afford that. But we have had people put themselves in danger. And I can see the thinking. They're thinking, well, I'm signed up for a tour. If something bad happens to me, it'll be their fault. Man, that keeps me awake at night. And so I've had a draft of a contract for some time, and I'm about to dust it off and add a whole bunch more to it, because we just can't afford to have people abandon their common sense the moment something goes wrong. And
Yeah.
frankly, it's only, it's maybe some of you who offer tours like April, so you may be way ahead of us in the development of your business, and have had contracts in place for some time, but I see this as just part of our growth as a company, and it's time for us to be that much more professional and have a contract in place that every person in the car has to sign before they go.
Yeah, it's a good point. I did have a contract for my very first trip, and I haven't had one since, because my trips are so small. They're like, 5 of us. And I don't know, we all like feel like friends, and it's hard for me to even think of it as a business. So, but you make a good point. You really should.
The moment something goes wrong.
Yeah,
Right.
exactly. Yeah.
April, do you use contracts?
I have a pretty simple contract, but again, I feel like Elaine that there have been times or instances where, and we've had a lot happen as far as tour guides and leaders. My groups are very small as well, 6 to 8. I think 10 this past year may have been my largest. But we saw the whole pandemic a few years ago, so that was a whole nother wrinkle in people's expectations, and what happens if they get sick afterwards, and so like Elaine, it does keep me awake at night of wanting something, and how do I think through every potentiality of something that may or may not happen. In most cases, if someone's had to cancel or chooses to cancel at a certain point, again, thankfully so far it's worked out where I've been able to 100% pretty much refund and eat some of it myself. But going forward, it does get pricey as putting things together, and affording some of those losses. So writing something up more detailed is definitely, as Elaine said, I've got one in a folder that I keep adding to and deciding how extensive does it need to be, because I'm hoping, again, as a good leader, to have good conversations and hopefully pull out the information, and that people will be responsible. Are they active? Are they physically able and healthy enough to take on some of the things we've outlined as a tour, as a trip. I mean, that's a concern too. And again, the common sense factor for sure. I don't want to be den keeper and locking everyone in their room at night, but there's certain places where, it may not be advisable, or if you go off the beaten path, how, that kind of thing comes up.
Yeah, because people so want to see some of these wonderful places, they wish themselves into a physical condition that actually isn't accurate. And then we as the operators are put in a very vulnerable position, basically trying to save people from themselves.
Yes.
If we had an older man with us on a big family trip. There were 10 people. Normally our trips are very small, like between 4 and 8, something like that. But well, obviously for a custom tour, if a family wants to have a big trip and get a minibus, great. So, but he didn't tell us about some conditions. And then on top of his conditions, he got COVID.
Oh dear.
And, so, he ended up having to stay an extra couple of nights in a hotel in the desert. And the rest of the group had to move on. Although fortunately, I was there along with our driver. And so he stayed behind with him, because that meant that this man had Imad, who had the local language skills as well as English. If he needed to go to the hospital or even get to a pharmacy to get medication. And of course, his wife stayed with him too. But so that enabled me to move on with the rest of the group. But then on top of that, you had the interesting family dynamic, because it was actually the family that voted to leave them behind.
Oh, wow.
So that was good news and bad news for us. I mean, it meant that I didn't have to be the bad cop and say, you can't come. I could say, this was your family's decision, and we as a company, tour company, support it. But that gave us pause as to how to manage people who wish themselves into a physical condition that really puts them in danger if something happens. So he recovered, and he really only spent the one day there. He was able to, we arranged other transportation for him and his wife to join us down the road. So he wasn't really seriously delayed. It's just he had one day of a long car ride. But it's very difficult in your contracts, in your information, to do that assessment. Like, is this trip right for me? Is this country right for me? Because if people want to go, they'll say yes, even if in reality, once they get on the ground, they discover that maybe it's not that great.
Right.
I can relate, because I've wanted to go to Machu Picchu for many years, but now that I can afford to go and have time to go, my knees don't want to cooperate.
Right. And I had a trip to Italy in June, and one of my travelers had really bad knees and, would be going on these, 2-hour tours or whatever. And she was just so slow and would always be waiting for her, and people were getting upset, and it just throws the whole balance off on a trip.
But you see, you never know, because when I went to Europe, we had a young person who was on crutches from Australia, and she was holding up the works, and she didn't want to go anywhere. And we had a very small tour. We were supposed to have like 40 people, and for whatever reason we only had 15, and they almost canceled the tour. But because of that, our tour guide made us, she was a local guide, but she took us across most of Europe, not England. We had a separate guide in England, but because of that, she made this poor girl go everywhere, because they needed a group of 15. They wouldn't take less. So the poor girl was hobbling around on crutches no matter where we went.
Oh
Oh
dear.
dear.
Wow.
Dear.
Well, it's 5 o'clock, you guys, so I really appreciate it. I know we all have busy lives, so thank you so much for joining in this discussion. I hope it gave you some things to think about, maybe some new questions to ask if you're considering travel, and just, reach out to your guides if you're considering travel. Be reading, and if you have suggestions for future topics, by all means feel free to reach out. I'm April with the-travelcollective.com, and my email address is april@jeffsong.com. So thank
Can
you,
you do
Elaine, for
another
helping.
one on travel insurance? Because you were going to talk about that.
Yes, we will have. I think I already did one. There's a couple episodes, but I'll put together a new one because I'm sure there's always updated information. So thank you, Dale.
Mhm.
All right,
Thanks,
good night.
everyone. All right, take care,
Okay,
everyone.
good night, everyone.
Take care. Bye.
Thank you. Bye-bye.